continuing our trend of undead dragons, since I'm still cataloguing the undead, and you can never go wrong with the tail of a dragon, let us discuss another one, shall we? But first, tell me, why do you think we like to categorize things in such a manner? Keep in mind, I'm being inherently hypocritical when I state this, as that's what I'm doing now, but it seems almost silly how we wish to label things as not being this or totally being that. I bring this up because it's immediately relevant to today's discussion on the ghost dragon, which is not a ghost, and I think by definition, no longer a dragon either. But I suppose it was a dragon, so I guess that works fine. It's like defining a fish. Yeah, it kind of fits the criteria, but not all of them do. Anyway, they are an incorporeal form of undead dragon, but surprisingly, they aren't actually that common, which is quite weird since the steps to making them are actually quite easy, and I would argue that almost the majority of dead dragons meet them. See, a ghost dragon is made when a dragon who is strongly attached to their horde, which is all of them, is killed and their horde stolen, which almost certainly happens every single time a dragon is killed. So again, it should be quite common, but for a few reasons, it's actually pretty rare. While the attachment to their hordes is normal, the attachment to one specific artifact is rare, and that's what triggers it here. They often take on the most extravagant forms you can imagine, like a small statue, a gorgeous gem, or just something tied deeply to them. The other part is that the dragon's death will have to be slow, or at the very least, they die right next to their horde. This is not for a magical reason, but because they have to be alive and witness the taking of the artifact for the transformation to occur. This would probably also mean that the final thing they see is their horde being looted. You can't treat this as a rule, but you can sort of act as if it is. But the final aspect that makes it harder is that they must know who did it. Now, I don't mean they have to be able to recognize them, since they can clearly see them, but they need to know the name and who they are to some extent. Something that's actually quite rare for dragons, since a lot of chromatic ones just attack one on sight, with no words when a group of adventurers invade their home. So they don't really form that moment of connection, and for that reason, most of them don't come back as ghosts. Gemstone dragons, on the other hand, are a bit of a mixed bag, and since their character is often in question, I would say that they're the most likely type to actually become a ghost dragon, with the second actually being the metallic dragons, since they are usually aware of the important humanoids around them and are often killed unjustly for their hordes. But now that you know how they are made, let's get back to the point I very quickly glossed over at the beginning of our discussion. The fact that they're not actually ghosts despite the name. While they are an incorporeal undead dragon, so to most unlearned adventurers, that's all you really need to be a ghost, right? But you know me at this point, I like getting all of my details straight, so let's actually go over what I mean. See, for a start, as you are no doubt aware by now, dragons don't really follow the same rules as humanoids, and for that reason alone, they really should be classed as something else. But if you remember our discussion on ghosts, they need a strong emotional force to keep them here. And at first glance, that's what's happening here, right? Their hateful avarice alone is keeping them here. But that's not actually the case. It has more to do with the natural magic a dragon possesses, and their link to their hordes, or rather, what should be their horde condensed into one artifact. See, a dragon's horde becomes a bit magical the longer the dragon possesses it. This is sometimes simply referred to as horde magic. This is where the stories of dragon sickness being upon their hordes that drive men mad and greedy after a short while comes from. There is some truth to it, although it's not as strong as people think, yet they can do some bizarre things with... Anyway, that's a topic for another day. But I suspect that when a dragon becomes obsessed with just one object, then this magic is actually noticeable, perhaps even able to make a non-magical item into one. And this is why they return. This connection to this object is the horde magic made manifest and able to resurrect them in soul alone to seek revenge and restore the object back into the horde. There is one slight hole in this theory of mine, and it's an annoying and inconsistent one. See, if it was as clear as I made it out, there would actually be a very clear way to consistently deal with them, and that would be to just destroy the artifact instead, which has actually worked before. But most of the time it does not, and the dragon then seeks to completely destroy whoever did it. My current leading theory is that this connection is only needed for the creation of the ghost dragon, and once it is made, the dragon can just then stay. But that wouldn't make sense with the fact that once the item is returned to the dragon's horde, it will fade away, meaning it does have some form of connection to it. To what extent, I'm currently unaware. That being said, however, just because the dragon fades away with the returning of the object, that does not mean it won't come back again, as soon as someone else picks it back up. In fact, I know of a group that did just that, returning a ghost dragon's object. It was a small golden statue encrusted with emeralds, by the way, hoping that they can just take it back once it's gone, only to have the dragon return instantly with what was no doubt a disappointed look on its ghostly face. Actually, I have yet to talk about what they look like, for they do just look like what they did in life, but incorporeal, with more of a smoke-like effect than the more ethereal kind people are used to. Which is actually quite funny, since almost every form of intelligent dragon can become one, even the smaller ones, like the fairy dragon. I mean, just imagine for a moment. You hear a booming voice, "Return what you have stolen from me." A dark, sinister fog crawls in. You feel the air around you go cold. A dark, unnatural presence slithers into your mind. You turn the corner and it's just this little guy. They have developed a new breath weapon, by the way, but it does take on the form of this smoky gas while still looking like what they used to have. For an example, if a red dragon became a ghost dragon, its breath would look like fire, but it's made of this dark smoke. Whereas if a blue one does so, it would look like lightning, but still made of this smoke. It just acts like the old element in its movements and shape. Perhaps I should get into what they actually fight like, for it does change a little bit after they die, with there only really being two things that cause it: the breath weapon I just spoke of, and the fact that they're just an incorporeal undead now. But their breath's new form is something that affects the mind more so than the body. Well, it does still affect the body, actually, as the new smoky effect is insanely cold, but less so than, say, a natural breath weapon from, say, a white dragon. But now it causes your mind to panic in a way that's actually quite hard to describe. Have you ever heard of the fight or flight response? It's how a brain normally reacts when something serious has happened, when you're in real danger and need to act now. Normally, these are the two things that happen. You stand your ground and fight, or you try to flee. But there are a few other responses that are less common, and one of them is to freeze up in place and act like you've almost been turned to stone. Well, for some reason, the ghost dragon's breath has the same effect on people. It makes you mortified of its presence, but causes this specific response in your mind, making you stand still and making you easy pickings for the dragon, who, might I remind you, is incorporeal now, meaning they can just move through walls, and I've even seen one appear up and out of the floor a few times. But I need to remind you that they cannot stay still when doing so, like other incorporeal things. But they can still bite and claw at you, yet you will find that it's not the same force behind them that they had in life. Instead, the bite is so cold to the touch that it slows your movements, and the claws actually possess a dark necrotic energy, draining you with every slash. And I should also note that them becoming undead gives them a immunity to all of the things most undead get, which is basically everything. But they can gain one last thing too, quite a surprising one. See, whatever process that brings them back also gives them telepathic abilities, allowing them to talk directly into your mind, which is a little surprising and quite interesting. It also allows them to communicate with almost anything too, since it's not with language that this works, but just raw thought and emotion. Well, as long as that thing is smart enough to understand that, like, say, an animal. My tale of the ghost dragon is actually what you would expect, a classic stolen object, but the tale is not actually mine, but one of my sisters, the teacher Iona Stoneheart, who had to save the day, all because of some student's curiosity. I don't remember the name of this group of students that were involved, but I know they were the usual troublemakers of the school, that's for certain. Anyway, the four of them learned that a brass dragon was recently killed by an encampment of hobgoblins. But because the hobgoblins also died in the assault, the Horde was left undefended. And so they wandered over to try and take some gold for themselves. However, when they arrived to the lair of the dragon, they found little gold at all, as brass dragons really don't care about that sort of thing. No, instead they found only one thing: an old grandfather clock. This was a gorgeous, old, ornate, wooden grandfather clock with golden filigree. The hands were made of silver, and the clock itself actually moved backwards, but not with time, in an unusual, hypnotic pattern that no one has ever fully discerned why. There were signs that the thing was already taken at one point, but also marks, as if someone had dragged it back alone. The students, not wanting to go home empty-handed, teleported it back with them and used a floating disc to bring it back to their dorm room. Only that without their knowledge, the spirit of the dragon had awakened. A few months later, the students actually forgot about the clock and left it in their room, only for this enormous ghost dragon to just appear suddenly one day and attack the academy, leaving Iona to figure out what had happened. After about 3 days, she convinced the students to give it back, apologizing and learning a lesson, all those goody-two-shoe things you'd expect, blah 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 blah. I really think she let them off way too lightly. I mean, I had to be called in to help with the situation. The dragon was that much of a hassle. Ghost dragons I just find intriguing, however. They seem like just a draconic variant of another thing at first glance, and in a lot of matters they tend to act just this way, but they follow their own set of rules. Like, why do they raise the way that they do? What force allows them to come back when the item is stolen? Why do some dragons obsess with one object? And why does that alone seem to be the main trigger for it? It's enough questions that I really love to dig into, but like many things, I don't actually think we're going to get the full answers anytime soon. The only thing I know for sure is that obsession really is a powerful thing. It's a good point, actually. Maybe we should discuss something else now. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me. But, till next time, fellow traveller, have a good day.